So, picture this, a fleet of civilian boats, an international naval blockade, and a really high-stakes showdown in the Mediterranean Sea. We're about to break down this incredibly tense standoff between what's called the Gaza Sumud flotilla and the Israeli Navy, right off the coast of Gaza. Let's use the source materials to figure out exactly what happened, and more importantly, why.
Okay, let's just drop right into the middle of the action. Can you just imagine the radio crackling to life at sea? On one channel, you have a civilian flotilla talking about their moral duty. On the other, you've got a military warship enforcing a blockade. This one little exchange, "We request you to stand down." Wow, it just perfectly sums up the entire conflict right there.
All right, so to really get what's going on in that tense moment, we've got to back up a little. What is this flotilla anyway? And what in the world were they trying to do by sailing straight for Gaza?
So at the heart of this whole story is the Gaza Sumud flotilla. Now, as you can probably guess from the name, this is not a military fleet. Nope, it's an international group of regular boats with regular civilians on board, and their whole goal, their one mission, was to directly challenge that long-standing naval blockade Israel has on the Gaza Strip.
But you know, this was about way more than just dropping off some aid, like baby formula. Their mission had a bunch of different layers. It was absolutely political. Their own words were to break the siege. And, this is a big one, it was also a legal mission. Some of the boats even had lawyers on board, specifically to document what they believed were violations of international law so they could take that evidence to the International Court of Justice.
And we're not talking about just a handful of boats here. We're talking about something like 500 civilians, people from all over the world, sailing on roughly 42 different vessels. The sources actually describe it as the largest convoy of its kind they'd ever put together, which really tells you something about the scale and the organization behind this whole thing.
Okay, but you know, in any confrontation like this, there are always at least two very different stories. So to get the whole picture, we have to look at how the Israeli government officially saw this flotilla coming their way. And wow, right here you can see just how far apart these two sides were. It's like they were living in completely different realities. The flotilla says, hey, we're a peaceful, nonviolent mission in international waters. Israel's response? You are approaching an active combat zone. I mean, you just can't get two more fundamentally opposed views of the same situation.
So here's the really crucial part of Israel's response. In their official statements, they didn't just call it a civilian flotilla, they specifically labeled it the Gaza Sumud flotilla. That's a huge deal, because it's a direct attempt to link these civilian activists to Hamas.
And to try and back up this claim, the sources tell us that the Israeli Foreign Ministry put out what they called proof of Hamas's involvement. This proof was a document that had a photo of the British politician George Galloway on it. You can see why this framing was so important for them. It was all about changing the global narrative from a humanitarian mission to a hostile one.
So you've got these two totally opposite views sailing right at each other. The big question is, what actually happened when they finally met out there at sea?
Okay, so here's how it all went down that night, according to the sources. Things really started to heat up in the evening when the naval escorts from Spain and Italy pulled out, saying it was for safety reasons. Then, around 9 p.m. Gaza time, the Israeli interception started. And get this, they were still about 70 nautical miles from the coast. That's in international waters. The operations went on all night, and people on the flotilla boats reported being hit with water cannons. But by the next morning, the story wasn't over. The organizers were claiming that about 20 of their boats had actually managed to get through and were still heading for Gaza.
And you have to understand, this whole night was just filled with tension. A big reason for that is history. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. The people on those boats, they knew the risks, and that's largely because of the deadly incident back in 2010 with a ship called the Mavi Marmara, where an Israeli raid ended with 10 activists being killed. That dark memory was definitely hanging over this entire confrontation.
Right, so an interception like this, especially out in international waters, it's not going to go unnoticed. It immediately kicked off this wave of reactions from all over the world, from governments to regular people.
And the way governments reacted was, well, it was all over the map. You had Spain calling the flotilla a peaceful initiative. Then you had France, which called for safety but also kind of hedged its bets by pointing out that they have a travel advisory for that area. But other countries went way further. South Africa flat out condemned the interception as a kidnapping. And Colombia, they went so far as to cancel their free trade agreement with Israel because of it.
But it wasn't just governments talking. The reaction from everyday people and civil groups was fast and it was loud. Protests popped up in big European cities like Rome and Brussels. In Italy, the country's biggest union actually called for a general strike. Lawyers started planning legal action, and activists all over were calling the interception a criminal act of piracy.
And this all brings us to our final thought for today. And it's a really powerful question from a UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese. She looked at this whole situation and asked, if a group of ordinary citizens in small boats could get this close to breaking the blockade, why don't states, with their powerful navies, do the same? It's a question that really makes you think, right? It kind of shifts the whole conversation away from what these few hundred activists did and puts the spotlight right back on the world's governments and the choices they make or don't make.
Audio Jungle.